Hi, welcome to Give Cheese a Chance, where I encourage you to make cheeses at home. I'm Marianne. Do you like goat's milk cheeses or chèvre? Initially, I was introduced to chèvre when I tried this kind of fresh goat milk cheese that is available at most grocery stores, and it is really good. But then my mind was blown when I discovered there are hundreds of other kinds of chèvres or goat's milk cheeses out there. And some of my favorites were Sauvaget and Selles-Sur-Cher. So I'm going to show you a recipe for a goat's milk cheese or chèvre that you can make at home. And this is what it's going to look like when you're done. The Sauvaget and Selles-Sur-Cher cheeses are aged. They're not a fresh goat's cheese like this. And they have a rind on them. It's a wrinkly rind that's totally edible and delicious. And sometimes you'll even get some spots of blue mold growing on them, which are edible too. If you like plain chèvre as a goat's milk cheese, you are going to love the more complex depth of flavor that you're going to get from this cheese. So let me show you how I make this cheese in my kitchen. Let's go. I am using 2 gallons or 8 liters of goat's milk, and I've put it in a very heavy bottomed pot. Now, if you have access to raw goat's milk, that is fantastic. You'll have an even tastier cheese, but I'm doing this recipe with pasteurized goat's milk I got from my local store, just to show you that if that's all you have, you're still gonna get an amazing cheese. I'm going to turn the heat on and increase the temperature of this milk very slowly and very gently over about a 15-20 minute period until it reaches about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll stir occasionally while it's heating to make sure that the warmer milk on the bottom mixes with the cooler milk on the top. And while I'm waiting for this milk to heat up, I'm going to take a pH reading. I have my pH meter here. I'm going to turn it on and stick it right into the milk. So my initial pH is 6.7, and I'm going to write that down on my log sheet because I want to keep track of how the acidity in the milk and the curd changes over the next few hours. And now I'm going to keep track of the temperature. Now that my milk has reached the target temperature of 86 degrees Fahrenheit, it's time to add my bacterial and fungal cultures to the milk. We're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of Flora Danica and sprinkle it onto the surface of the milk. And then we need 1/32 of a teaspoon of Geotrichum candidum, which will give a beautiful wrinkly rind to the surface of this cheese. And we just sprinkle it on and let it sit there for 1 minute before we mix it in. While these are rehydrating on the surface of the milk, dilute 1/2 of a teaspoon or 2.5 milliliters of liquid calcium chloride into 1/2 of a cup or 60 milliliters of non-chlorinated water and stir well. And mix 1/8 of a teaspoon of double strength liquid rennet into 1/2 a cup of non-chlorinated water and stir. We're going to add our calcium chloride solution into the milk and stir. And then we're going to add our diluted rennet solution into the milk as well. We're going to stir the whole thing for 1 minute. The rennet that we just added is going to transform this milk from a liquid state to a semi-soft gel over the next 18 to 24 hours. Now that I've finished stirring, I'm going to put the lid onto the pot. And I'm going to wrap this pot in some blankets because I want to keep the heat in. I don't want it to be in a drafty place where the temperature will cool down quickly. I want to keep it nice and snug and warm so that the bacteria wake up and start converting the lactose or milk sugars into lactic acid over a very long period, 18 to 24 hours. So I'm going to wrap it in some blankets and tuck it away into a draft-free corner of my kitchen. Good morning. It's now been 18 hours since I inoculated my milk. Let's take a look inside our pot. We're going to unravel the blankets. We're going to check for two things. We want to make sure, number one, that the milk has turned to a yogurt-like consistency. And number two, we're going to do a pH reading to see if our milk has become more acidic. We're hoping that it's going to lower from 6.7 down to between 4.4 and 4.6. So let's look inside the pot. Wow, what a difference. If you look inside the pot, you'll see that there is a lot of liquid whey on the top. And underneath that liquid whey is a curd mess. And you might find yours has some cracks in it, and that's a good sign. We want to now take out our pH meter and do a pH reading. I'm sticking my pH reader directly into the curd mass. So we've got a pH reading of 4.4, which is perfect. Let's take our pot over to the kitchen sink. I've brought my pot of curds over to my sink, and in my second sink, I've set up 2 strainers just to double up on my straining abilities. And on top of the strainers, I've got some pre-sterilized fabric that is going to line the inside. I'm going to use a large ladle, and I'm going to remove all of the liquid whey sitting on the top of my curd mass. And now I can much more easily see the curd that is underneath, and it looks beautifully thick. Take a look at that. And it smells amazing too. Wow, I could just eat it like that. But of course, I'm going to drain it, and then after an hour or two of draining, I'm going to fill my molds so that I can get the right shape. I have found that by pre-draining the curd before I fill my mold, it makes the draining process go so much faster. And it also gives me a slightly drier cheese, which is what I want. If you only have one strainer, you might have to fill it to the top and then come back every few minutes and top it up just to get everything straining at the same time. So I'm going to let these drain, and then I'm going to come back and fill my molds. It's been about an hour that it's been draining now, and I did come by once, and I'm going to do it again now. And I'm going to encourage the curds to drain some more by lifting up the edges of the fabric and gently turning the curds over. That will allow more whey or liquid to be released into the sink. My next step is to transfer my cheese curds into their molds. And since I'm trying to imitate the Selles-Sur-Cher and Sauvaget French cheeses, I want to get the right shape. Those cheeses are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick and 3 to 4 inches in diameter. The best mold that I have at home is my camembert sized mold. So I've got 5 molds here that are placed on top of individual plastic nettings. These will allow more moisture to drain. And they're all sitting on top of a roasting rack so that there is some support for the cheeses with the top layer, and the liquid will be caught inside the tray underneath. I'm going to use my large ladle and carefully transfer all of my curd into the forms. And you can use 4 molds or 5. It all depends on the thickness of the cheese that you want at the end. Well, that was pretty easy. Cover these with a heavy board to stabilize them as they drain. And I'm going to come back in about 5 to 6 hours and flip them before I go to bed. I'll see you then. Hey, it's been 6 hours now, and it's time to flip our cheeses. I've got an extra piece of plastic netting here, and I'm going to put it on top of one of my forms. I'm going to take a small and thin board and slide it underneath, and I'm going to put another board on the top, and that's how I'm going to flip the cheese. And it looks great in there. And I'm going to place it back down so it will continue to drain. And I'm going to do that for all of my cheeses. Well, that didn't take long at all. I'm going to put this board on top of the cheeses just to protect them from dust, because I'm going to leave them to drain some more overnight. So I'll see you tomorrow morning. Hi, it's now day 3, and today we're going to flip our cheeses, we're going to weigh them, and we're going to salt them. So let's do our first step, which is flipping the cheese. Just like we did yesterday, we put a piece of mesh on the top, we slide a board underneath, we put a board on top, and we flip. And we do that to all the cheeses. And now is a good time to get rid of all the liquid whey that has accumulated in the bottom of your roasting rack. Wow, look at all of that liquid, so I can dump that. It's important to salt your cheeses because the salt will, of course, make the cheeses taste better. It'll also help develop a rind. It'll preserve the cheese more. And really important in this case is it suppresses or slows down the growth of the mold. We don't want the mold on the exterior of the cheese to be too wild. It just suppresses it a little bit to give it a more controlled rate of growth. Even though we want our final cheese to have a salt concentration of 1.5 to 2%, we're doing a calculation based on a 3% salt concentration because we know some salt is going to be lost over the next few days as the cheese continues to lose moisture, and some will even remain on our fingers as we salt the cheese. So this cheese is 334 grams. And I can safely assume that all of the cheeses are about the same weight. So if I use the weight of this cheese to do a calculation, I multiply the weight of the cheese, 334 grams, times 0.03, and that will tell me that I need 10 grams of salt per cheese. So I'm going to weigh out in each of my bowls here 10 grams of salt so that I'll keep track of how much salt goes on each cheese. One by one, I'm going to sprinkle half of each bowl onto each cheese and let them sit there for a while because the salt will draw out moisture from the cheese. The moisture will combine with the salt and create a brine, which then gets better absorbed into the cheese. I'm going to remove the molds so that I can massage the salt into the surface of the cheese. And we don't need to salt the sides of this cheese because when a cheese is about an inch or so thick, the salt penetrates down into the middle. You don't have to worry about salting the sides. And I'm going to put the molds back just to make sure they keep their shape a little bit longer. It's been an hour, so I'm going to flip the cheeses and salt the other side. And I'm going to rub the salt in. The cheeses are still pretty soft at this point. And now it's time to add our vegetable ash to the surface of these cheeses. And vegetable ash is going to give these cheeses that interesting gray rind. And I've got some vegetable ash in a strainer and I'm going to lightly tap so that a small amount goes onto each cheese. And in this case, less is more. You don't want to put too much ash or it'll create streaks when you cut through the cheese. So just a small sprinkling, as if you're adding pepper onto your food. So this ash will not give any taste to the cheese and it's totally edible. The Geotrichum candidum fungus is going to grow through that vegetable ash and create this wrinkly gray exterior, which is so artistic and beautiful to look at. Be careful working with this black ash because it can get all over your fingers and the countertop, so try and keep it under control. In my ripening box here, I have a tray to keep the cheeses off the bottom of the box, and I've got individual mats for each cheese. I'm going to flip the cheeses, and I'm going to sprinkle the black ash on the cheeses directly in the ripening box. There's enough moisture in these cheeses to provide humidity in the box, but if you're finding that the cheeses are drying out, then make sure to add some humidity into the box by using a moist paper towel in the corner. And it's also really important, especially in the first few days, to remove any moisture that has accumulated at the bottom of this box. So I'm going to close the lid, not tightly. I'm going to leave it slightly ajar because I need some airflow. So the air is going to go in here, and I'm going to keep it at 10 degrees Celsius in my basement cold room, and it's going to stay there for the next 2 weeks. And I'm going to check on them every day, making sure to flip these cheeses, and I'm going to have some delicious cheeses to eat in a couple of weeks. I always find it fascinating to watch the bloomy coat form on a cheese. In this case, the fungus appeared around day 4 and continued to grow slowly, covering the surface of the cheese, creating a grayish-white wrinkly coat. This is the cheese that we made together during this video, and it is 14 days old, and I can eat it as young as 10 days old. You can choose to eat it now, or you can age it longer. This cheese is the exact same recipe, but it is 30 days old. And look how the surface has changed quite a bit. It's much more wrinkly. It's a little bit more gray. This cheese has a much stronger aroma and a more pronounced flavor. Since we made several cheeses in this batch, you can taste one every week for several weeks and find out if you prefer the younger version of this cheese or the older version. It's up to you, and everyone's taste is different. So let's cut into the cheese that we made together and see what it looks like and tastes like. There are a couple of things to look at in this cheese. On the inside, we have a beautiful white paste. And you can also notice there's a little layer of creaminess directly under the coat. And that layer of creaminess will get thicker as the cheese matures. So let's have a taste. Of course, it tastes like a goat cheese, but it also has a subtle flavor of citrus to it, which I love. It's very fresh and very enjoyable. You can serve this cheese as part of a cheese board when you're entertaining, or you can also cut it into wedges and serve it with some spinach or arugula and some strawberries as part of a salad. It makes a great lunch. If you like goat cheeses as much as I do, make sure you check out my other recipes for home cheeses using goat's milk, such as crottin and valençay. I'll put links to those videos in the video description below. Well, I really do hope that you enjoyed watching this video on how to make a Selles-Sur-Cher style goat cheese at home. If you did, please click the like button below, and also make sure to click on the subscribe button so you can see my videos about home cheese making in the future. For Give Cheese a Chance, I'm Marianne. Happy cheese making!